Seated. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. And just when you thought you were safe, there would be no sermon this morning. Sorry. So, the latter part of the book of Exodus, which we concluded this morning, contains the mundane details of the elaborate steps taken by the Israelites to build the tabernacle, as Elizabeth explained in her overview. The tabernacle was the portable sanctuary which they used to worship God during their 40 years of wandering in the desert. Now, these steps included the donation of assortment of goods, of materials, as well as the donation of skilled labor towards their effort. Now, in calling on these donations, the Torah uses three phases, or I should say three phrases, which I want to talk to you about this morning, because they relate directly what we need to do today regarding our obligations in the Jewish community. So what are these three phrases? Firstly, we are told, and let all among you who are kol chacham lev, who are wise of heart, come and make all that God has commanded. Second, we're told, take from among you gifts to God, everyone whose heart so moves him. Kol nediv libo shall bring them. And finally, we are told, and everyone whose heart was raised, kol ish asher nasa libo, was instructed to build the tabernacle. So what do these terms mean? And what do they come to teach us today? Now, you may recall that 2 years ago, it's unlikely, but you may recall, that 2 years ago I spoke about the difference between Chacham Lev and Nediv Lev, and why Moses didn't ask for those of Nediv Lev to assist in the building of the tabernacle. I mean, if they're Nediv Lev, if they're good of heart, wise of heart, you think he would want them. Briefly, the reason that Moses didn't want those of Nediv Lev involved in the actual construction of the tabernacle was because Moses realized that sometimes people don't use their hearts wisely. They let their emotions overwhelm them, and their good intentions sometimes lead to very bad results. The perfect example of this is the incident involving the golden calf. We read it 2 weeks ago. The Israelites eagerly donated all their valuables to the building of the golden calf, but they didn't stop to think. Perhaps they wanted to join the bandwagon. Perhaps they wanted the kavod, the big honor of being a donor. Or perhaps they just got swayed by their emotions. In any case, they let their nediv lev, their emotions, get to the better of them. And that is why Moses only wanted those who have, in addition to a nediv lev, a giving heart, those who have a chacham lev, a smart heart. Moses only wanted those people who weren't going to get caught up in the emotion of the moment, but who gave and who had given thought to what they are doing and why they were doing it. He wanted people who were willing to follow the directions and build the tabernacle the way that God had intended it. Not those who are just going to throw things together and be satisfied with whatever comes out. And that is why Moses stopped asking for donations from the people. It's the first and the last time ever a Jewish leader has ever done so, to stop giving. But it's the third phrase, kol ish asher naso libo, everyone whose heart was raised, which I want to speak about, because I didn't mention it previously. Because it is of great significance to us today not just as it relates to the building of the tabernacle, but of establishing and maintaining a strong and supportive Jewish people and community. So what does that phrase, Kol ish asher nasa libo, everyone whose heart was raised, what does it mean? Now, according to Maimonides, all of those whose hearts were raised refers to those who were involved in carrying out the actual building of the tabernacle, as opposed to those who provided the donations. So what's the big deal, you might ask? Well, think about it. Remember that these Israelites have just spent 430 years in Egypt, 200 of those as slaves. They didn't go to Harvard or Columbia, thank God not Columbia, and earn degrees in mechanical engineering, architecture, artistic design, or even terrorism. That's on the agenda at the moment at Columbia. And yet the people, sensing the importance of this task to the Jewish nation, raised their hearts and volunteered to help design, build, and decorate the tabernacle, somehow finding themselves within their own hearts to not just donate money, which is nediv lev, to not just think about it, chacham lev, but to have the desire and the ability to take the appropriate actions and to do so, nasolev. In other words, their hearts move them to act heroically. And we see the same thing today within our Jewish community. We see those who let their hearts rule. Unfortunately, not in a good way. Those who might only think correctly, but don't act. And those whose hearts truly inspire them to rise to the occasion and act heroically. Now, I'll illustrate this by sharing you a tale of two cities. But actually, not really two cities, but two Deborahs. And I'm going to start with the actress, the Jewish actress, Deborah Winger. Yeah, I see the eyes rolling. You might remember her. Well, the other week, she took part in a demonstration at Trump Tower, along with about 150 people from the group Jewish Voice for Peace, protesting the arrest and deportation of Mahmoud Khalil and for his role in the Columbia protest and takeover of Hamilton Hall. They stormed the building wearing red T-shirts emblazoned with "Stop Arming Israel" and similar anti-Israel slogans. But if that wasn't bad enough, Winger sounded off about having a debt to pay for her Jewish upbringing. She said to Al Jazeera, "I was brought up Jewish. I was brought up with a lot of things that were untrue. I had to unlearn them, and it's taken me a lot of years." She explained that she didn't agree with an idea that she was raised on, that Israel is the Jewish homeland. "I have a debt to pay," she said. "I have a debt for what I grew up with and believed on what the state of Israel has done and what they haven't done, and how they're conflating Judaism with Zionism," as she said of pro-Israel advocates. Now, Deborah Winger, God bless her, is the perfect example of someone who is solely nediv lev. Her emotions get the better of her. And what does she do? She joins the mob. And it's certainly not an example of chacham lev, of a smart heart. She is an example of a misplaced heart, someone whose heart is in the wrong place, supporting terrorists rather than the victims of terrorism, blaming Israel for imagined misdeeds instead of criticizing Hamas, saying nothing about freeing the hostages, and going so far as to deny Israel's right to even exist. This is the perfect example of why Moses didn't want people who were only Nadiv Lev involved in the actual construction of the tabernacle. Now, I don't want to make this sermon all about her and refuting her claims, because I'm sure we can all do that. All we have to do, non-stop over the past 18 months, is to keep talking about it and keep speaking about all the futile claims that are being made. Instead, I want to talk to you about another Deborah. Another Jewish actress, Deborah Messing. You might remember her too from Will and Grace. Since October 7, Messing has been outspoken in support of Israel's right to defend herself and advocating against anti-Semitism in support of the hostages. She is one of the executive producers of the important documentary called October 8, which documents the rise in anti-Semitism in America, especially on college campuses, since October 7. Now, although there are many important issues raised in this documentary, here are two that I want to bring to your attention. One, the film demonstrates how, beginning on October 8, hence the movie's title, before Israel began any military action in response to being attacked, the anti-Israel forces were already engaged in organized mass protests in favor of Hamas against Israel and glorifying the resistance and the massacre. Think about it for a second. The day after October 7, the very next day, October 8, these protests were organized and ready to go. The second point the movie makes is how much misinformation and disinformation is out there, not only in the mainstream media, but especially on social media, where, for example, you can find 54 times more anti-Israel and anti-Semitic content on TikTok than you can find on Instagram. Why is that important? Because where do our young people get all their news and their education and their intellect from? It's from TikTok. Deborah Messing is an example of Nasolev. Her heart is in the right place, and it moved her to act heroically. Deborah Winger, for one, is not Nasolev. Jewish Voices for Peace, founded, funded, and led by Arab money, is also not. Oh, they're very smart. They're chacham lev. They're very smart. They know how to manipulate minds and hearts, but certainly not for good, and certainly not in the way that Moses and our faith intended. But more importantly, Deborah Messing and those like her, Jewish activists like Tessa Wexler, Shai Davidoff, Shabbos Kestenbaum, who also appear in the movie, who have stepped forward in defense of the Jewish people since October the 7th, are examples of those whose hearts were raised of Kol Ish Asher Naso Libo. God inspired their hearts and raised them to speak out despite the hatred and the threats that they have been subjected to. The truth is that anyone and everyone, not just celebrities, can and should participate in the work of and in the service to the Jewish people. There's just one requirement, though, if you do: that your hearts be raised and inspired to act in the true service of our faith, of our people, and of our homeland, and never in service of one's own misguided ideals. With God's help, may we continue to live our lives with Nadiv Lev, with Chacham Lev, but also with nasolev. But may we know when and how to use them, and when and how not to use them. And may we always raise our hearts and our voices and act as is necessary to preserve our Jewish faith, to support and strengthen the Jewish people, and to defend the state of Israel, our Jewish homeland, as we continue to fight the seemingly never-ending battle against those who seek to vilify and destroy us. Shabbat Shalom. Nancy, you're up.